From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Today is going to be an important day for us.
You ready?
We want to be our brother's keeper. What's number 2 we want to do?
Bring it up to 90 decatherms.
How about you, Joe?
Alex, let's go ahead and bring it online.
Attention on site.
Attention on site. Now starting in 9 minutes.
Some of the world's cleanest gas turbines are now powering some of America's biggest cities. Siemens answers.
Creating a financial safety net can seem like an impossible goal. Complicated, intimidating, something other people get to do. But once you take the first step, you'll find there's nothing standing in your way. MetLife. I can do this.
Issue 1, Israel versus Iran.
איראן שעומדת מאחורי הפיגועים הללו.
Iran, who stands behind these attacks, is the biggest terror exporter in the world.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week accused Iran of being the biggest terror exporter in the world. On Monday, terrorist bombers attacked the Israeli embassies in New Delhi, India, and Tbilisi, Georgia, the landmass between the Caspian and the Black Sea, hugging Russia. Then another terrorist bombing attack in Bangkok, Thailand. Iran denies that it bombed the Israeli embassies. The question is, what is the likelihood of an Israeli military strike on Iran? George Friedman, founder of the global intelligence firm Stratfor, says that the likelihood of an Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities is a quote-unquote, a 1 in 4 chance. Here's why. 1. Extreme difficulty. Quote, such an attack would involve Israeli air sorties of over 1,000 miles, coordinated with missile attacks from Israeli submarines. Ship-launched missiles can't carry payloads of bunker-busting bombs necessary for much of the task. Iran's anti-missile defense system is anything but Mickey Mouse, unquote. Civilian casualties in Israel, quote, likely rocket and missile attacks from Hezbollah and Hamas in Gaza could be higher than expected. There will be no lightning victory achieved such as during 1967's Six-Day War, unquote. 3. Crippling oil prices. Quote, an Israeli attack would prompt Iran to try to close down sea traffic in the Persian Gulf at its southern choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, where some 20% of global oil production passes. Oil prices would be likely to spike vertiginously and cripple global economic growth, unquote. 4. No U.S. assistance. Quote, to be successful, the action would require U.S. assistance, and that aid is unlikely to be forthcoming, especially in an election year, unquote. 5. Fear of annihilation. Quote, even if Iran succeeds in building some kind of nuclear arsenal, the Islamic Republic faces immediate annihilation if any of the weapons are ever used, unquote. Question. Let's assume that Prime Minister Netanyahu picks up the phone and calls up President Obama and asks whether his defense secretary, that's the Israeli defense secretary, can call U.S. Defense Secretary Panetta to discuss prudent military action against Iran. What do you think Commander-in-Chief Obama would say to him on the phone? Go ahead and have your guy call my Secretary of Defense and let them discuss it. Do you think he would say that?
I think Obama would say to the Prime Minister, sir, we do not want you attacking Iran, and if you do attack Iran, the United States is not going to back you up here. We don't want a war. We think our sanctions are working. We don't think they have decided to build a bomb. They don't have a bomb. We think we've got time. We know your concerns, but do not attack Iran. The thing that Netanyahu wants, John, Israel's got a very powerful military, but they cannot take out these installations themselves. What's going to happen what Netanyahu wants is if he's got to start it, bring the United States in, because what you got to take out is their anti-ship missiles, their anti-aircraft, their air force, their navy, their offensive missiles, their nuclear sites. And frankly, I think in order to stop the long-range nuclear program, you got to take down the regime. And even we are not prepared to do that.
Eleanor.
I agree with most of what Pat just said, and I would commend you for that setup, because I think there's a lot of loose talk that makes it seem like it would be very easy for Israel to undermine the nuclear program.
As they did in Syria.
Right, exactly. When the best case scenario is that they would probably set it back maybe 3 to 5 years, and they would inflame the ordinary people there who see nuclear possession as sort of their God-given right. They would feel that way if they were assaulted from the outside. I do think, though, that Secretary Bennett has probably had conversations with Ehud Barak, the Israeli defense minister, and each side knows where each side stands. And I think what the Israelis are gambling is that there could be a window before the election where this before our election, where this president might not be willing to stand up to the Israelis, which is, if he gets reelected, then they know they won't get any help. I would think that Pat is right, though, that this president sees all the downsides, and he understands that the sanctions are squeezing them. The rial, their currency, has lost half its value, hyperinflation. The sanctions are tighter than they have ever been. The Europeans are not going to import oil. So you've got to give that time to work.
Do you think, what do you think of this?
Well, I think they're right. President Obama does not want the Israelis to attack, but there are differences in viewpoint here. The Israelis consider this an existential threat, is not such a threat to us, and the Israelis see the window for them acting on their own, perhaps to delay this program closing, and they would really not entrust President Obama in 2013 or Mitt Romney or Rick Santorum. They probably could trust Rick Santorum to take care of the problem, but the others they would have doubts about, so they want to do it themselves. Now, if they feel there's no other alternative, but the Stratfor setup is correct. This would be at the very far end of their capability, and the question is how much damage could they do, and would it be worth potential downsides? Now, I don't think the Iranians would close a Strait of Hormuz or attack our interests in the Gulf, because then they bring us into it, and at the very least they're going to lose
their
navy and a huge part of their military.
The proposition is that they can't do it without us.
They can do something. The question is, can they do enough? And you're right, it's not Iraq.
You know what the spread out is of nuclear reactors. They have about 7, and it goes from the northern part of the country up near, what's the name of the body of water up there?
Black Sea.
The Black Sea, all the way down.
It's a big task, but John, look at this regime that has in effect been at war with them for decades, that they don't consider highly rational, that they consider willing to do anything, attack diplomats overseas, sponsor terrorism, and it's a risk they don't want to take.
I think it's the Caspian up there, by the way. Caspian to the Black Sea. That's the stretch
further east.
Yeah. Mort.
Well, I mean, I do think that this is seen by the Israelis as an existential threat, and this is something they're just not willing to live with. They don't feel that the United States is going to be supportive, even though they would like the United States to be supportive. But that is a country whose ethic has been captured in a phrase, never again, which means they're not going to risk what they see as another Holocaust that might befall Israel. It's a very small country. They'll be very vulnerable. The Iranians have made it absolutely clear that they intend to do whatever they can to damage the Israelis. This is the kind of threat the Israelis cannot live with, period.
Mort, look, Israel,
you heard the damage that can be inflicted on Israelis.
Yes, of course, but what is worse for the Israelis? To take the risk of making this attack, or to live with an Iran with nuclear weapons that could destroy Israel? They won't accept that.
I cannot commend that single-page piece, which he manages to pack so much in, which is in the current issue of Barron's. But what is one of the other points he makes that's very consequential?
Well, John,
that
oil,
John,
gas
Israel
prices?
There's of course the gas prices over here, but that's a kind of a secondary consideration.
Yeah, but it would postpone
But this window of opportunity that they have, he seems to feel, Stratfor seems to feel that it's inevitable that they're going to have the bomb. And then he says, so what? Then they're going to have some serious things to talk about. But he doesn't mean the bomb. because the Iranians know that if they use a bomb, it'll be immediate annihilation. You follow me?
Well, yes and no. Okay, the real issue from the Israeli point of view is that they are building this facility near the mountain of Qum, where they will literally, if they get all of their various nuclear facilities there, the Israelis will not be able to do anything about it. So that is the window that will be shutting on them.
You understand that they have nuclear plants all the way down from the Caspian, all the way down
facilities.
their country.
They have to transform.
They have about 7 nuclear plants.
They're not plants, John.
Nuclear plant. The fissionable material is going to be developed, and it's only going to be developed in
Natanz and Fort Al. Right now, Israel is the existential threat to Iran. Iran is no existential threat.
Israel is going to destroy Iran.
They got 200 to 300 nuclear weapons. And if the Iranians develop and build a bomb, I don't think they're going to, but if they do, Israel will put those 200 weapons on a hair trigger. I don't believe the Iranians are as nuts as everybody else says. They haven't fought anybody since when, John?
Right, and
go ahead.
And if the Israelis do attack, it doesn't end the existential threat as they see it. It postpones it. And in the meantime, you have Iran retaliating with all kinds of terrorist attacks. The setup that you showed, that's just a hint of what they can do. And that can rapidly get out of hand, and that can certainly affect us in this country as well.
Even if there was a nuclear response by Israel, or a nuclear attack, call it what you will, Iran will continue to have a massive conventional army, and they will have the public fervor for some kind of action, hostile action against Israel will be immense. There's that consequence too. Yes. And they will have a conventional military, and a big conventional military.
Yes, but let's face it, if you just have to watch what Iran has been doing and what they have been saying, you cannot diminish the extent of that threat to Israel. They're not threatening Iraq anymore, but I just would point out in the war with Iraq, they had 100,000 kids to clear up the bomb sites on the ground, and they died. They were willing to do that. You have a level of radicalism and religious fervor in that country that makes normal calculations.
Exit question.
You have a protest movement that's on the opposite side.
Exit question. What are the odds of an Israeli military strike on Iran right now, Pat?
I would say 1 in 5, not 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, 1 in 5. I just don't think they're going to do it because I don't think they can succeed, and I don't think they're confident that the United States is going to back them up. And you don't wound a snake, you kill it.
Will the United States, in fact, disapprove? And could that lead to an entente versus a détente?
Obama, the Joint Chiefs, the intelligence community, none of them wants this war with Iran, and they don't want the Israelis to drag us into one.
Eleanor.
Public opinion in Israel is divided, so I agree. I think it's
between
1 in 4 and 1 in 5. I think this person that you had in the setup is pretty on the mark.
Rich.
I think it's about a 70% chance. It's an intolerable threat. Right. If Iran gets the bomb, you're never going to unravel that. Plus, you're going to end up with the Turks with the bomb, Egypt with the bomb, Saudi Arabia with the bomb. If Iran gets the bomb, the odds of a nuclear weapon going off in a conflict in the Middle East increase drastically.
What's wrong with the MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction, operating on that level?
Now, even if you assume Iran's not...
It's been all right since 1907.
We lived under it for the entire Cold War.
Even if you assume Iran's not going to nuke anyone, and they probably won't, it gives them carte blanche for even more of the sort of behavior they've engaged in the Middle East.
North
and the
Korea
idea that this is a highly responsible regime
the only nation that has ever used a nuclear bomb, the only nation that's ever used a nuclear bomb is the United States.
North Korea has not done a thing, despite the fact they got bombs. They haven't intimidated us.
They do not have an existential threat. South Korea, North Korea. South Korea, nor China is going to attack North Korea.
Do you think Israel has an existential threat?
Absolutely. Why? Because listen to what Iran has been saying and doing, and what they have been doing for terrorist attacks. They're not under threat as a country. Israel is under threat.
And if this regime,
wait a minute, all around you remember that the nuclear scientist who was knocked off? Who knocked off the nuclear scientist from Iran?
Of course, but why is that? You know why that's happening? Because they're trying to stop the development of nuclear
weapons. So, John, can you say?
What are the odds? What are the odds?
Me, I think it's at least 50-50.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
I will say 1 in 4. Issue 2, brides no more.
Wedding ceremonies, bridal music, smiling couples, forget about it. Today, more and more Americans are shunning marriage. The percentage of American adults married today is 51%. So says Pew Research Center. That's the lowest rate of married adults ever recorded in any earlier Pew polls. And it doesn't stop there. Those Americans who do marry are waiting longer before they say, I do. In 2010, the marriage rate for Americans aged 25 to 34 was 44%. 50 years ago, 1960, 82% were married. So why is marriage becoming increasingly passé? Item, divorces. The divorce rate in America has long been 50%. 1 out of 2 marriages fails. Item, economy. Today, Americans wait until they have a firm financial footing, like graduated from college, on a payroll, before walking down the aisle. Item, no stigma. Americans today are less likely to turn up their noses on those who live alone or cohabit.
People have a lot of options in their lives now. Society doesn't disapprove of you if you live alone or if you live with an unmarried partner.
Now hold on, Devera. The number of children born out of wedlock has gone up. There's a troubling correlation. More unmarried people having more children out of wedlock. Today, the percentage of Americans born out of wedlock is, get this, 40%.
Questions. Does it strike you as ironic that just as heterosexual interest in marriage is apparently on the wane, gay and lesbian interest in marriage is waxing rhapsodic? Rich.
Yes, that is an irony. And when they say that marriage died, they'll put it on the heterosexuals, who have done a very good job of destroying it as an institution. 1970, you had about 10% illegitimacy rate. Now it's 42%. And another thing that people miss is particularly eroding among the middle and the working class. If you look at marriage rates among the upper class, it's basically the same as it was in 1960. It's eroding in the middle and in the working class, which adds to the economic pressure and is creating a real crisis of the working class.
You know who supports you on that?
Who's that?
Charles Murray. Who is Charles Murray?
He is a scholar at AEI who just wrote a book called Coming Apart about this very class division, which is not just economic, it's social and cultural.
He makes the same point that you just made. You think you should notify him of that?
Right.
That
Well,
without knowing it, you made the
book.
same point, which is some kind of a corroboration, an
Charles
innocent
Murray
corroboration
and
of his
a
findings.
scholar at the University of Virginia, Brad Wilcox, have been on this for a long time.
It is, John, the triumph of the counterculture. That's right. Among working class white folks, the illegitimacy rate is over 40%. Among Hispanics, all Hispanics, it's 51%. Among African Americans, it's 71%. Among the poor, it is pandemic. The values of the counterculture with regard to family and marriage and divorce and premarital sex and all of these things are triumphing, frankly, in the culture and in society, and we're seeing the consequences of it now. Some of us feel it means coming apart, disintegrating.
Wait a minute, Ellen. I want to ask Pat a question. Do you think the state should be involved in marriages? Why do we have the requirement that a registration is needed for the state?
I think the Judeo-Christian idea of a family and children is of enormous benefit to the entire society, and it can form that society on the basis of its values, and it did. Unfortunately, the values are changing. There's no doubt about it. When California, of course, they defeated gay marriage out there, but legislatures are passing it.
On the abstract level, is there any reason why marriage should be related to the state? And you would have to sign a book if you want a license to get married.
I think
wait a minute, Ellen.
Children, there are various rights involved. Married couples, there's also children involved, obligations and duties. So yes,
the society.
You want the state to be involved in how the children are reared?
No, I want this. I mean, there's obligations to protect the children. You can't do certain things.
You mean there could be a tax responsibility to take care of a child if a child is born out of wedlock? Is that what you mean?
Society has agreed they're going to be educated, etc. You can do it by home.
Can't religious institutions carry that problem?
Unfortunately,
why have the state involved at all?
Unfortunately,
not in theory. You don't need the state involved in a marriage.
If you have
it's
a religious
contract between spouse and
true, if we were a Judeo-Christian country like we used to be, yes.
Where are we now? An atheist country?
We're a secular / Christian country and increasingly secular.
Are you doing anything about it?
Yeah, I just wrote a book that got me in trouble.
Can the counterculture speak here. I mean, they're so in love with the institution of marriage. There are a lot of enduring relationships that don't have the institution of
There's
marriage.
cohabitation.
Right? And
what's wrong with that? Are you going to denounce that?
I'm not denouncing that at all, and I do not see a decay in our values. Bring back some of those high-paying manufacturing jobs, and you'll see a lot more marriages along the traditional lines that Pat seems to favor.
You also have a situation where women now can get jobs that enable them to be self-sufficient. They don't have to get married in order to have a reasonable life. That has changed dramatically.
Are you saying that women like marriage more than men do?
No, I'm saying they like their independence just as much as men do, and they now can afford their independence, so they don't have to get married just in order to have
Interesting point.
Yes.
That
seems to me is a very important
So marriage
point.
is what? Disappearing?
No, it's not disappearing. It's just going to happen later in life for a lot of people, simply because they
Why
can
bother
live independent.
if everything's going well?
Because there are a lot of good benefits to being married.
Like what?
Like what? There's a great, unless I'm mistaken, according to the books I've read, okay, there's companionship.
You can have companionship without marriage?
I'll tell you more. I'll instruct you.
What's a companionship without marriage?
I don't want to turn this into a personal, but there's also an environment in which you want to raise children, okay? And that's one of the things that...
Sure, I was just going to say one...
The joke about gay marriage is, of course, we're in favor of gay marriage because they deserve every right to be as miserable as everybody else. So I think that kind of puts it in perspective.
On cohabitation, that's a key point. Actually, the divorce revolution has receded somewhat and has gone back to the levels of around 1970. It's cohabitation that's radically increased.
That's right.
It has, and it's
the
not.
only reason
it's
why
not
divorce
those
is because they're
relationships.
not married to start with.
Right, and those
They're
relationships,
cohabiting.
they aren't as stable and they aren't as good for the
Okay, issue 3, the Obama budget 2013.
Today, we're releasing the details of that blueprint in the form of next year's budget. But the main idea in the budget is this. At a time when our economy is growing and creating jobs at a faster clip, we've got to do everything in our power to keep this recovery on track.
President Obama this week unveiled his 2013 budget, October 1, 2012 to September 30, 2013. Spending for this 2013 fiscal year under the Obama plan is $3.8 trillion, the most expensive federal budget on record. Of that $3.8 trillion, $2.9 trillion will come from U.S. taxpayers, income taxes, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, sales taxes. They are federal taxes. That leaves a gap of $900 billion, a gap that will be filled by borrowing $900 billion from lenders, notably the PRC, the People's Republic of China. Republican Senator Tom Barrasso says this.
Somebody asked me if this budget was dead on arrival, and I said, no, it's not dead on arrival, it's debt on arrival.
Very cutesy, Tom. The Obama budget also includes a plan to reduce the nation's debt. It now stands at $15.4 trillion. He's doing it by taxing the wealthy. Item, income tax hike. Income taxes for households that make $250,000 a year or more will jump from 35% to 39.6%. Item, Buffett tax hike. Those who make more than $1 million a year will be taxed at a rate of 30% or more. The Buffett rule. Warren Buffett, that is.
Boy, do you want to comment on the budget?
Do I want to comment
can
on
you pull yourself together?
This is going to be more than $900 billion in terms of deficits, okay? It's going to be way above that because there are assumptions in there as to the amount of taxes we're going to be, we will be raising according to his budget. That will never happen. So this is a budget in which we're going to add immensely to our budget deficit and immensely to our overall deficit. And this is not necessarily going to do anything about the economy. It may save it from going down a little bit more, but it's not the way to solve the problems we have. We're not dealing with any of the major issues that this economy
has. And also,
wait a minute. Let's review some numbers here. The public debt right now is about $15.4 trillion.
That's right.
Trillion dollars.
That's right.
That's our debt.
That's right.
We're carrying that debt, and we're paying off the interest on a lot of that debt, which is being held by the Chinese.
That's right.
What's the interest that we're paying them? You know,
the total it's got to be. You're
Chinese
talking about
got over $1 trillion of the debt themselves, and their own 3.2 trillion.
What do you
reserves.
think? What do you think the interest is we're paying to the Chinese on their carrying a good portion of our debt?
I would guess the United States is paying the Chinese between $40 and $50 billion a year on that debt. They probably got it at 4 or 5%.
And we've been paying the Chinese interest for long before Barack Obama took office.
But not nearly as much.
This is a budget that
This
is a budget that is not going to pass because the Republicans wouldn't pass anything he proposes anyway. It is a setting out of a particular vision, and that vision is that you can't drastically cut a deficit before you invigorate the economy, or you're going to look at a lost decade. So he has his priorities right. He brings the deficit down over the long term, and he puts some critical investments in spending.
Look,
you all oppose it.
Can I address this? Let me address it.
It's going to do a lot better as a vision on the campaign trail than the Republicans and whatever you're about.
Let Rich in.
A classic Keynesian believes you spend in a recession and then you cut when times are better. This is 10 years when growth is assumed to be pretty healthy, but spending at the end of it will be at 23% of GDP.
Now we're saying growth
this isn't
is
a
healthy,
Keynesian
the
budget.
is back.
It's a flat-out tax and spend big government liberal budget.
I want to know who the head of state is. Who's the head of state in the UK?
Cameron.
You know what
head of state is the Queen. He's the head of government.
You know what he's straining to do? He's straining to get rid of his deficit.
This is
he's straining to get rid of it. Wait a minute. Let me tell you what.
I know what he's doing.
Let me tell you what another head of state is doing. He's got a relatively small national debt, and he's straining to get rid of it. He thinks any national debt is bad and ruin it. We've got a $15 trillion
John,
debt.
it makes Eleanor's point. There are 2 points of view. One of the European view right now is austerity on the Greeks and the Spanish, and in Britain austerity. But they're not growing, and so the debt to GDP is continuing to grow. The other side is the Obama side, spend and
Are you edified by the fact that Cameron is trying to get rid of the debt?
But it's not working.
Mitt Romney wins Michigan. Yes or no?
Yes, he will carpet bomb Santorum.
Yes, but not by enough to eliminate Santorum.
Yes, thanks to the negative ads.
Yes, and he will drive to the polls in an American car.
I said before, yes, and he will. Bye-bye.